Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Today I'll be working on my Norfolk Island Pine forest. The last video on this tree was in spring of this year, and since then they've been growing really well. These trees are often called the triangle tree because on Norfolk Island their natural shape is to grow in a triangle. If you let the trees grow, they'll lose their triangular shape and they'll start to grow really heavy on the top. And you can see that happening with these trees, is that these upper branches are getting really dense and the lower branches are small and weak. Today I'll be pruning up the Norfolk Island Pine forest, restoring the balance of vigor here in the bonsai zone. Over the summer, these trees have put on about 3 tiers of growth. So there's, a set of branches here, another set higher up, and a top set of branches. So I'll want to reduce the height of the trees also. I don't want them getting too tall and it'll make the trunks look very skinny. So I want to reduce the height of the trees and bring the trees into that triangular shape. Some of the trees are getting double leaders. So instead of just, one single trunk line going to the apex, they're starting to get some branches off the side so they have kind of a multi-trunk look to the structure. So I want to reduce it down so there's just one trunk line again. On the number 1 tree here, you can see that there's a trunk line coming up here, like that, right here. And there's the main trunk line coming up here. So I have 2 choices here. I can replace the main heavy trunk line with the smaller, thinner one. That'll get me more taper. It'll reduce the height of the tree. And this one comes more towards the front, so that is probably a good idea. My other option would be to prune the thinner trunk down and keep the thicker one that's growing towards the back, and then kind of reduce that height. I like the idea of, going with my thinner leader coming up the front of the tree here and removing that thicker one at the back. So that's what I'll do. It makes more sense in this case. So if we go to the side view now, I would have to remove this whole trunk line, which is pretty major cut, but it'll get my height down. I'll get some taper. It's all for the better of the tree. So that's what I'll do. I'm going to come in and remove that thick part. Now these will grow from cuttings. I had several good cuttings take on this forest, so I'll come in here and I'll try and get a nice flush cut. Here I go. There we go. So that's a lot to take off the top of the tree. Now I'll come in and look at all the other trees and see if I can, reduce them in height, maybe by replacing the apex or maybe by pruning the height down. Let's look at tree number 2 back here now. You can see some of the old needles are going brown, and that's just natural. As the tree gains strength, the older needles start to die off. So I do have some multi-upright trunks here. The thickest one is coming towards the front. I think it's definitely been pruned back before. I have a thinner trunk going up the back. So I want to look from the front, and I want, a natural flow line to the new leader. And none of the other ones really flow naturally, except for the new, that thick one. So I think on this tree, I'll just be reducing the height of the tree. So let me see, there is a nice branch there. So I can remove this back portion. So I can prune it right back to here. So here I go, like that. So that removes the top off that tree and keeps a nice flowing leader coming up to the tip. I may come back and adjust these heights later on, but for now I'm just kind of replacing my apexes if I can. The next tree I'll be looking at is my number 3 tree here. And it doesn't have much of a choice. There is a thin leader back here, but that's much too low. I think If I let that grow, maybe that'll become a future leader and I can replace this entire top section with this back branch someday. But for now, I think I'll just have to reduce the height of the tree. So I'll come back. There's a branch at the front here, and I'll prune just above that to here, like that. So that's creating that kind of asymmetrical triangular silhouette to the forest. So my next tree here is also just a single line coming up the trunk. So I'll prune it back to here, like that. Keeping that sort of triangular shape. There's one at the back. The back trees need to be shorter. So I will have to reduce it back somewhere about here, I think, which is kind of, there's no leader in sight, but I'll just prune it here and we'll see what happens. To there. Now let's have a look from the front. There's a look at the forest so far. It's getting there. This tree at the back here has a very low branch down here, and I'm not sure I want that or not. I think I was trying to grow the one tree as a twin trunk, which happens on Norfolk Island pines. They're not all single trunks all the way to the top. So I think I'll keep that. I'll want to prune the height down, so I'll come back to here. Like that. And then there's another cutting here that's getting a little tall. I'll prune that back to here. Like that. And then a cutting on the outside here can be pruned back to here. And I've got one at the back here that needs pruning back. And I think I'll take it back to here, like that. So I think that's got the basic heights in check. I may take just the tip off of, no, maybe I won't. I think that one's okay still. This is the tip I was going to take off, but I think I'll let it grow a little more. So there's kind of the basic shape of the forest. In a bonsai forest, you want to create forest perspective, and that's done by keeping your tallest trees in the front. And as they go towards the back, they get shorter and shorter, and that makes them look like they're more in the distance. You also want to do the same with the bottom of your canopy. Your tallest trunks will be in the front, and as the trees get towards the back, you want that distance between the soil line and your first branches to get smaller and smaller, and that'll make the trees look like they're far in the distance. So I'm going in now and just looking at my lowest branches. So you can see the trees up front, they don't really start branching till way up here. The middle trees should start branching about halfway, somewhere about here. So some of these ones, like this one, is too low. I can remove that, and I can remove this one. And then the trees at the very back, the first branching starts very close to the soil level. And that gives me a really good forest perspective look to the planting when viewed from the front. My next step for the forest is to prune all the branches that I have left, to prune all the trees into a triangular shape. So, you know, some of these upper branches are really long, and I'll have to prune them back. So I just prune between the needles and clip them off nice and short, especially these upper ones. As I get down towards the bottom of the trees, I'll leave the branches longer, creating that triangular shape. So pruning these upper ones back quite hard. Any of the branches that are growing in towards the other trees, you can either shorten them back or remove them entirely, just so there's not a jumble of branches crisscrossing in the center of the forest. Some of the upper branches are really long and vigorous, but they still need to be pruned back. So pick a point close to the trunk here and snip it away. Like that. And the trees, they look very sparse until they start growing in again. And then they kind of fill out. It's always a shame cutting off nice green growth, but just has to be done to make the trees into, miniature versions of the full-size Norfolk Island pines. I'll just work away at pruning all these trees up. It's a beautiful sunny day in the plant room today. It's really nice being out here. Really enjoy it. Doesn't matter what you're doing, if you're pruning trees or removing insects, or it's just nice to be out here in the sunshine. Okay. Giving all the trees their own little space. Pruning them back nice and compact. All right, I think I've finished most of the pruning. I'll come up front and have a look at the overall arrangement of the trees. I'm out front having a look at the forest now, and I noticed that the trees on this side, they're kind of pushed out, and that's because the branches were growing in against the other trunks, and it was kind of forcing them to lean over on an angle. So I think that's something that I'll have to correct. I think to fix that, I'll have to maybe position some rocks beside the trunks just to hold them vertical until the kind of roots get reestablished in that position. So I'll try and find some stones that I can position beside the trunks. All right, I'm coming in with some stones, and I'll try and get that trunk vertical like that. That looks vertical. This one's on a bit of an angle too, so it can use a bit of correcting. Maybe like that. There's one back here that's a little crooked. I can move it over like that. That one's a little more stubborn. The rest aren't too bad. I'm going to have a look at it from the front now. I'm looking at the forest from the front, and maybe I've gone a little too far. I'll adjust this one over just a bit. I think that's looking better. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I think the planting, it makes it look more mature when they're vertical like that. When trees are kind of leaning over, they look more like immature trees, which is fine for the ones in the back there. They're not perfectly straight, but you definitely want your tall, mature trees to be vertical to give them that look of strength and stability. And I think that's got it. I like the arrangement. I've got, those two trees on this side are very close together. I've got kind of unequal spacing between all the trees. It doesn't look like a pre-planned planting. It looks very natural, and I think once it gets moss and, a bit of landscaping on it, it'll look really good. And as the trees grow and mature more too. As with any clip and grow project, you have to do the grow part, which I did, and then you do the clip part. And you can see I took a lot off today, reducing the trees down to the minimum, and now I'll let them recover and grow in again. I've had very good success with growing cuttings off the Norfolk Island pine. It does take several years before they get enough roots established that the tree becomes stable in the pot. So I would say, a cutting like this with a fairly woody trunk down here would probably take at least 2 years before it has enough root mass to kind of hold the tree up. For the first year, they kind of sit there. They don't grow many roots, and they just kind of sit there staying alive. So it takes a couple of years before you get a good root system on the tree. And you can see even with the forest that some of the trees are still a little tippy in the pot. And that's just because they haven't got a massive root system on them yet. Last time I repotted them, I removed a lot of the root system. So it'll take several years before they become stable in the pots. It's time now for today's update. Today's update is my pomelo seedlings. Let's go in and have a look at them. I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seedlings that have germinated and are just starting to grow. So that's kind of exciting. I'll rotate the forest around so you can see it from all sides now. There's the side view. Around to the back. The other side. And back to the front. So that's all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.